Big time fight coming up at middleweight this weekend. Andrea Muniz looking to stay perfect in the UFC. He's got a big time test in front of him in Roll Tide's own Eryk Anders. And for ya boy, this is a guy who's had the highest of highs in the UFC, the lowest of lows, and in main events, Anders has had a weird run, and I want to go through it a little bit because sometimes he gets big wins over Darren Stewart. Sometimes fights are close against Darren Stewart, and then they're not. Sometimes he knocks out Tim Williams with the most disgusting soccer kick I've ever seen in my life. Sometimes he loses fights to Elias Theodorou. So really, it's been a weird mixed bag, and for Anders, I say in main events it's bad, but he had that weird short notice call-up when he took on Thiago Santos, and it went so bad. He had that fight against Lyoto Machida that was, I mean, listen, did he win the fight? No. I don't know. We can agree or disagree till the cows come home.
Again.
But it just continues to further the point of this guy's had a weird rant. Like, he's lost to Christoph Jotko and Khalil Roundtree in the UFC. And not just any Khalil, Bangkok Ready Khalil. So for Anders, it's odd. He's made the move over to Fight Ready in Arizona. And he's looked good his last two performances under Eddie Cha, under Santino DeFranco. He's a weird case because he's still somewhat young in his MMA career, but he tends to fight quite a bit. He's also not the youngest guy. He's 34, almost 35. For Andrea Muniz, I have to say this. I had no clue what I was getting when he came into the UFC. I thought he was going to be bad. I knew how good of a grappler he was, but all of his losses are primarily by knockout. His last loss was years ago against Azamat Murzakanov, which, listen, he was supposed to be in the UFC last weekend on short notice at heavyweight against Jared Vanderas, so that would have been interesting. But for Muniz, nobody can submit him, right, Matt?
Muniz has one way to win this fight. Yes, he's a third-degree black belt in jiu-jitsu. Yes, he's great on the mat. I'm telling you this right now. It's not like Cachoeira is like a Rodolfo Vieira, where I'm worried that he's going to get tired and that there's a world out there where Cachoeira could get submitted. I'm telling you this right now. Cachoeira is not going to get submitted by Andrea Muniz. There is not a world, there is not any situation where Muniz outgrapples Cachoeira in this fight. I understand people are going to be selling your wolf tickets. They're going to say, hey, if anyone can do it, it's Muniz.
You may have said that you knew how good his grappling was. I obviously didn't, because I didn't think there was a single world out there where Andrea Muniz would be able to submit Cachoeira. Now, was it a beautiful transition to the armbar? Yeah, it was. Did he break Cachoeira's arm? Yeah, he did, resulting in a submission. So I was proven wrong. But I will say, I've never been happier to be wrong on this channel in my whole life. Because when someone like that gets submitted of Cachoeira's caliber, it proves that the person who did the submitting must also be an absolute monster in their own right. And for Muniz, he does have that 10 out of 10. That's probably not even doing it justice. Just how good his jiu-jitsu is. If you are on the mat with Andrea Muniz, you are in danger of getting submitted. But this is one of those weird fights where, let's say we stack up all of both guys' skills just next to each other. I don't even think, they don't even come close. I think Andrea Muniz is by far the more skilled mixed martial artist between these two guys. I think his technique on the feet is better. I don't think he has more power or more speed, but I do think technically he is the much better fighter in a lot of areas. What I will say, though, is that he's kind of slow at reacting to shots coming his way. Eryk Anders is very, very fast for the size of him. And Anders, I hate just using he's a really good athlete, but it really does sort of paint the picture when you talk about Eryk Anders. He's just a big guy who's way faster than he should be for the size of him. And he's got this weird striking style where he can sometimes be in that open karate stance, but he likes to crash forward with his boxing. It is very unique, and it's very odd because, listen, do I think Anders can grapple with Muniz for even 1 minute in this fight? I don't. Do I think Muniz can stand with Anders for a little bit? Yeah, I do. But if Muniz can't get the takedown, I'm going to be really worried about him in this matchup. And it's not like Eryk Anders has lights-out takedown defense or anything like that, but when you're as strong and you're as fast as a guy like Anders is, you're going to be able to defend some of those sloppier takedowns coming from the other side of the cage. So this fight, more than any other, is just going to come down to how does Muniz transition from his striking into his takedown attempts? 76% takedown defense from Eryk Anders in the UFC, and if you focus on the guys that he's fought, well, who's taking Eryk Anders down? Let's go through it. Thiago Santos took him down once. Anders took Santos down 6 times. Who else? Marcus Perez took him down twice. But that's pretty much it. Like, that's it. And he's fought some good fighters in the UFC. For Muniz, his takedown average in offense, 40%, 3.12 per fight. You like to see that. So it really does come down to the key Excalibur-type strength that Andrea Muniz possesses to the well-roundedness of Eryk Anders, and he is very well-rounded. Now, does he fight in MMA like a football player? little bit?
A refined amount. I mean, let's take some football players that are in MMA and talk about how they capitalize on their athleticism. Matt Mitrione. Greg Hardy.
Brenton
Schouse. That was going to be mine. Like, there's some of these guys that, yeah, they already had those intangibles. They just had to turn it up a little bit, gain a little bit of fight IQ, and knock out Mirko Cro Cop. For Eryk Anders, he's one of those guys that's done that and then cranked the dial off. He's probably one of those premier athletes and versions of, I used to be this, now I'm this. Like Volkanovski, I was a thick boy rugby player, now I'm the best featherweight at this current juncture. I'm not ready to capitalize and crown him the best. Still think Jose Aldo's best featherweight.
Eryk Anders is the type of guy who, like, has probably never played basketball before, just shows up to a YMCA and can dunk without shoes on.
Like Jimmy Graham.
Yeah, like, it doesn't really matter what the sport is. You just sort of tell him what the rules are, and he'll be able to pick it up as he goes. Now, with MMA, he is much more refined than what I just laid out, but I still don't look at him as this massive technician on the feet, or with his wrestling, or with his grappling. I feel like he's a very physically dominant fighter, but when his physical gifts are at least on point with his opponent, that's when we normally see his opponent take over. Like, for instance, I would say Eryk Anders is a much better athlete than the majority of the opponents he's fought. But against Thiago Santos, who I would say, especially at the time,
good
ACL's intact, what is like as good of an athlete as we've ever seen in MMA. You can see that, okay, athleticism can keep you on point with some of the strikes landed back and forth, but when Santos was able to go deeper into his bag, initiate the leg kicks, use elbows, that's when Eryk Anders does start to fall behind in fights. And even the Machida fight, like Machida was older in his career and it was a close fight, but still, when Machida was using his footwork to almost set up Eryk Anders and walk him into his shots, that's when he was having a lot of success. So I think with Anders, if you can outthink him in the cage, it does give you an opportunity to win. And with Muniz, that's interesting because Muniz isn't really a thinker in the cage. He's much more of a, I'm going to go out there, I'm going to get your back, and I'm going to try to choke you out. So although this fight seems like a bit of a mismatch, I know the odds don't suggest that, I think this is going to be a great fight.
I mean, the best fight to go back and watch for Muniz, if you like him in this one, the Bartosz-Fabinski fight. I remember doing the preview going, all Bartosz does is go for double legs and leave his head to the side. If Muniz just grabs it, he's going to submit him. But I'm taking Bartosz anyway, and then look what happens. So, Matt, the odds for this one, Eryk Anders is the underdog. I threw my notes out, so he's a plus 105. At open, now he's a plus 119. For Muniz, open, a minus 125. He's a minus 144. Tapology votes, surprise to us, they are to you. Yeah, I mean, 582 total votes, 87% Muniz, 75% by submission. For the 13% that have Anders, 48% by knockout, 34% by decision. Matt, we've given equal opportunity to both guys, but what's the pick here?
Remember on last weekend's card, I said, hey, I like Jimmy Crute, but I've got a really weird feeling about this fight, and if Jamal Hill wins by knockout, wouldn't be surprised. Andre Muniz should win this fight. Again, when we talk about skills and who is the more skilled mixed martial artist, without question it is Andre Muniz. But there is something to be said for athleticism, and that is making me just sit on the fence a little bit, although my official pick will be Muniz. Will I be surprised if Anders goes out there, defends a few early takedowns, gets Muniz tired, knocks him out with a big shot? Not at all, because I do feel like we're seeing a bit of an evolution in the game of Anders, especially with his last two fights against Aaron Stewart, but I think the pick is going to be Muniz.
I like Muniz in this fight for the sole fact that Anders is very good with the stand-up, and he's progressed a lot since he's joined Fight Ready. But he will still implement the takedown, and when you're messing around with that up against the cage or on the mat, Muniz is not that guy. So we'll see how Anders adjusts here. I can't wait to see these guys face off. This is a great one for question mark kicks 2 hours before the prelims. We also have a fight companion this weekend that you're not going to want to miss for the main card with those 2 title fights. Right now, as it stands early in the week, both of us going with Andre Muniz, but you could cut this one with a knife. It's razor thin. Absolutely love the fight. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, and as we always say, let's get into it.